Silent Separation by Guman, Chapter 8.2. If You Leave. As Yichen normally returned home late, Mosheng decided to eat dinner outside. It was after 8 when she finally returned home. Opening the front door, the house was very dark. She fumbles for the light switch as a deep-milled voice suddenly roared out, "Back already?" "Yichen?" Because she did not expect it, Mosheng was shocked. The voice came from the balcony, his tall body in a dark silhouette. He stood with his back to her and did not turn around. The atmosphere between them suddenly turned somewhat depressing. "Why didn't you answer the phone?" Yichen asked softly. Between his fingers was a burning lit cigarette. "What phone? Mobile phone?" Mosheng took out her mobile phone out of the handbag and found out it had already shut down. "The battery's dead." "No batteries?" So that was a reason. It seems as if Yichen breathed out in relief. His voice sounded a little bit tired. "You better go to bed early." "Okay," Mosheng replied. She thought for a moment and then said in determination, "Yichen, I have something to say to you." "About what?" Mosheng bit her lips and muttered, "I felt that we don't behave like a married couple. We..." "Really?" Yichen asked decisively. "How should a married couple act? In this regard, you have more experience than me." There was no reply for a long time. Yichen put out the cigarette and turned around. Mosheng, with her hands holding a shopping bag, stood a few meters away. She pursed up her lips tightly and her complexion was peeled. "I bought you a windbreaker," Mosheng said softly while staring at the floor. "But I used your credit card to pay for it. Do you want to try it on?" Suddenly, the stab of pain in Yichen's heart made him unconsciously clench his fist. In these past years, all he had dreamed of was that one day, Mosheng was able to stand in front of him. He could touch her if he just held out his hand, where this was no longer an illusion. She was really standing in front of him, so what more could he still want? Yichen's voice softened. He took a pause. His face turned pale when he stared at her hair. Unable to ignore his intense gaze, Mosheng looked up. Was he looking at her hair? She said with a little embarrassment, "I just cut my hair." "I have eyes, I can see that." His tone stiff and his eyes still. He finally turned away. It was as if he could not stand to look at her anymore. Yichen quickly lit another cigarette. A long time passed before he said with an extremely repressed voice, "Go to bed." "But don't talk to me right now," he rudely interrupted her. Although she was tired from shopping, Mosheng couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to Yichen's footsteps from the balcony to the study room. After a long time, he walked from the study to the guest room. Then the sound of the door closing. Finally, everything was quiet. Mosheng did not know when she finally fell asleep. The next morning, when she woke up, her throat felt itchy and very uncomfortable. Her years of experience told her she probably caught a cold. Yichen had already left the house. Mosheng found and took some medicines. She hastily ate lunch but still felt uncomfortable and continued to sleep. When she woke up again, it was dark outside the window. Yichen was standing next to the bed. He put a hand on her forehead, seemingly a little worried. Mosheng looked at him, thinking she was dreaming. Yichen took his hand away and said gently, "Get up, I'm taking you to the hospital." No need, it's not serious. I just have a little cold." "You have a fever." "I've already taken some medicines," Mosheng insists. Yichen looked at her, nodded, and did not say anything as he walked away. Mosheng thought he was no longer persistent with her, so she felt a little disheartened. Surprisingly, Yichen walked to the wardrobe. He took out her clothes and put it in front of her. "Do you want to put the clothes on yourself, or do you want me to help you change?" Yichen took Mosheng to the hospital. The liquid in the IV dripped down slowly, drop by drop. Thinking about him just threatening to help her change her clothes, Mosheng flushed red. She glanced at the man sitting in front of her, reading some documents. Feeling as if her eyes on him, Yichen looked up. Mosheng quickly turned her head. Yichen did not mind. Suddenly, he seemed to remember something. He stood up and walked out. He returned with an entertainment magazine and put it next to her. Mushan pretended not to notice. Instead, she began to read the newspaper left behind by others. Yichen raised his eyebrows and went along with her. If his wife wanted to learn more about investing in securities, that was not a bad thing. Mushan stared at the newspaper. What was this? Mostly diagrams with only a few words. The numbers in technical terms made her head hurt more. Regret. She glanced at the colorful magazine and really wanted to take a look. She glanced at Yichen again, who has his head held down and seemed very focused in reading his documents. He was unlikely to notice. Her hands quietly moved over. When she almost reached the magazine, suddenly Yichen turned a page of his documents. She withdrew her hand immediately. Forget it. Mushan decided to give up. Only a bit over an hour, just put up with it. There were things Mushan could put up with, but there was one thing Mushan could not put up with. Half an hour later, Mushan began to appear unsettled. Yichen noticed her movement and wrinkled his eyebrows. He turned to a 50-plus-year-old woman who was sitting next to him and said, "Can you do me a favor?" After returning from the restroom, Mushan endured for a while but still could not help but ask him, "How did you know I wanted to go to the bathroom?" He did not even bother to lift his head and simply replied, "I've guessed." This man, Mushan glared at him. Returning from the hospital, Yichen put Mushan to bed. After she has fallen asleep, he turned off the lights and walked to the study room. Not knowing if she slept too much in the afternoon or if it's the effect of the IV, Mushan felt a lot better. She did not feel sleepy anymore. Rolling in the bed several times, she suddenly remembered something and almost jumped up. She had to go to Hong Kong tomorrow, but had not prepared anything yet. She didn't know what she had done these past few days. How could she have forgotten something so important? She quickly got out of the bed, took out her travel bag, and began to pack her things. Her movement was too rapid, so some documents fell onto the floor. Mushan bent over to pick them up. However, another pair of hands was faster and had already picked them up instead. When she straightened up, Yichen immediately grasped her hand tightly. He was holding the documents and looked furious. "What are you doing?" "Packing up my things." His grip was painful and Mushan wanted to break free, but he further tightened his grip. Glancing at the luggage that was almost finished packing, Yichen's eyes darkened considerably. "Where are you going?" Remembering that she had not told Yichen about her trip, Mushan replied obediently, "Hong Kong." "Hong Kong?" Yichen's anger gradually increased. If he had not called her by accident. No, it was not exactly by accident. If he had not come by to check if she had fallen asleep, would she have disappeared without a trace again by tomorrow morning, just like 7 years ago, without him knowing about it? Did she even understand what it meant to be someone's wife? Did she understand that she was now his wife? This she could not abandon and leave him all alone again like before. The old wound was mercilessly torn open. He gripped her hand harder, and his gloomy eyes glared at her with accusation. "Fine, tell me, how many years do you plan to be gone this time?" What was he saying? Mushan felt drowsy again. The pain on her hand was growing more and more unbearable. "Yichen, can you release my hand first?" Release her? Impossible. Mushan struggled to pull away and fell into his embrace. He bent his head and kissed her fiercely and angrily. The way he kissed felt as if he wanted to swallow her whole person, allowing a bit of room for her to breathe only. He tightened his hand on her waist as if wanting her to merge into him and becoming a part of him. Yichen, Mushan wanted to pull away from his grasp. She could feel his action was motivated by anger, but did not understand why. Her soft moaning instead acted as a catalyst for his passion. Her struggling ignited his desire to control her. He pushed her onto the bed, and his body fell onto her, leaving her firmly in his control. His eyes looked deeply into Mushan's eyes. She was the only thing he has ever wanted to possess. "Mushan, this is a marital obligation." He sucked her delicate skin, leaving her marking on her body. His action was forceful and direct, leaving Mushan trembling. Painful. Yichen paused briefly. Painful? She can also feel pain. Pain would be the emptiness after waking up in the middle of the night from a dream and knowing she was out of his reach. It would be never seeing her childish smiles again. It would be an unexplained lapse of concentration in whatever he did. It would be the loneliness after celebrating a winning case. How would she know? Mushan, in those moments you were in another man's embrace. Her pajamas was ripped open in half by him and pushed to the waist. By chance, it entangled both her hands, making her unable to move. Hence, she could only let him do whatever he wanted. Everything that he saw in the intoxicating passion made Yichen lose his sanity completely. There was a fire in his eyes burning into her. This was what he desired very much. He has imagined and yearned for this countless of time. The longing he had repressed for 7 years could not be constrained anymore, erupted and completely overwhelmed him. His hands roved wantonly over every inch of the places he wanted to possess. Together with his hot kisses, branded every inch of the skin he wanted to possess. That kind of passion that was filled with a trace of hatred, resulting in Mushan incapable of thinking clearly. She appeared dazed as if she had fallen into a dream. Until the sharp and strange ringtone sounded, shocking her back to lucidness. Mushan seemed to recall this strange ringtone was reserved for Xiaohun. The mobile phone. How could she think of the mobile phone at this time? Yichen increased his onslaught, but the ringing continued on loudly that he could not ignore it. He slowly loosened his grip on her hands and stretched out his hand to turn off the phone. Mushan finally has a chance to breathe properly, but her quick grab of air turned into coughing. She already had a cold, so how could she stop coughing now? The ringing had stopped, only her severe coughing was heard in the bedroom. Half of Yichen's body was pressed on top of her body, but he did not continue because a little of his sanity has returned. Mushan's pajamas was disheveled. There were many red marks on her body as if to accuse him of his recent brutality. He could even feel her body slant trembling. Self-loathing filled him. He, Yichen, you had already forced her to marry you. Now you wanted to force her to go to bed with you. He gave a wry smile. Why are you going to Hong Kong? It's a business trip. Our company wanted to cooperate with the magazine publisher in Hong Kong. Yichen, I will only be gone for a few days. I forgot to tell you, Mushan explained clearly. Yichen stayed silent. What did he just do? Mere sexual assault. Yichen had calmed down his rapid breathing. He was trying to repress his restless emotion tide by helping her to tidy up her clothes. When he was fastening the button on her undergarment, he felt her body trembling, till he felt a bit worried. I will not hurt you, he murmured and smiled mockingly at himself. Abruptly he stood up and walked out of the bedroom. Mushan only heard a loud bang as the door closed and she was once again alone in the bedroom. The strange ringtone sounded again relentlessly. Mushan moved over to pick up the phone. Xiaohun's excited voice could be heard. Ashen, there's one more thing you must not forget to buy for me. It's very cheap to buy in Hong Kong. Finally, she finished her long speech after some time. Mushan hung up the phone. She wanted to smile but could not. She would go to Hong Kong tomorrow while they were like this. Hesitating for a while, she finally pushed open the door. There was only a dim table lamp in the guest room. Yichen was sitting on the bed and staring intensively at her. An ashtray beside him was already filled with many cigarette butts. Mushan walked quietly to the other side of the bed and put her own pillow down next to his. She lifted a corner of the quilt, carefully laying down next to him, and then closed her eyes. Yichen did not move except to lit another cigarette. After a while, Mushan murmured, Can you turn off the light? I want to. The word sleep just disappeared into thin air. Suddenly, she was carried by him to sit on his lap. She was imprisoned tightly in his embrace. His warm breath was blowing on her neck. Yichen's husky voice was filled with a subtle tension. Do you know what your action implies? How could she not know? Mushan lowered her eyes and lifted a finger to write on his chest. One word by one word. Yichen shuddered and grabbed her restless hand. His eyes filled with many emotion as he stared into her eyes. Mushan, how can you torment me like this? The instant she rolled on his chest, the deep antagonism between them disappeared. Yichen kissed her deeply, wanting to prove that at this moment she was real. When he was finally willing to release her, Mosheng was already grasping for air. She weakly fell onto his chest. This kind of silence was rather uncomfortable. Mosheng tried to think of something to say. Yichen, I have a cold. Wasn't he afraid it would be contagious? I know. I won't take advantage of you now. Yichen hugged her in a hopelessness and resignation. Confused, Mosheng was expressionless. Did he misunderstood her? But did he wanted her to say that was not what she meant? She could not. If she seemed eager for him to bully her, he would certainly laugh at her later. Actually, you can't bully me. Who said that? It could not possibly be her. Mosheng was very embarrassed. Yichen stayed silent. Did he not hear her? Mosheng started to feel a little at ease, only to discover that her buttons were undone already. Her soft and snowing white shoulders were gradually exposed to the cold air. Her delicate skin was covered with love bites left by his kisses, very deeply and clearly. It could clearly be seen to what extent he had exerted himself physically. Now he merely wanted to bully her once more all the way through. His red-hot lips once again touched her skin, burning the old marking left behind. Mosheng, did I hear wrongly? Yichen's voice was hoarse. Mosheng could not speak. He had already done so much. How could he still ask? The extinguished passionate fire was easily reignited again. Suddenly, Yichen lifted Mosheng up, walked into the bedroom, and put her onto the bed. This place was much better. What was the difference? Mosheng did not understand, but she did not have the strength to ask. Yichen's boiling hot milled body covered hers. His fiercely lips and tongue overbearing possessed every inch of her body. She tossed about and moved up and down in that other world which she had never experienced before, lasting until the passion retreat. Mosheng fell into an uneasy sleep. Suddenly, she woke up in the middle of the night and noticed the place next to her was empty. Her eyes scanned the room to discover Yichen was standing in front of the window. Maybe it was because of the darkness, but Mosheng felt his real view was very serious, making it difficult for her to breathe. As if feeling her looking at him, Yichen turned around. She could not see the emotion hidden in his eyes in this dark night. He put out the cigarette, walked to the bed, turned back the quilt to lay down next to her, and quietly held her. Mosheng was quiet for a long time. Finally, she could not help but ask him, Yichen, what were you thinking? Her voice sounded a bit worried. Nothing. I've just figured out a few things. Figure out what? Mosheng wanted to ask, but his lips seized her lips. Mosheng, grow your hair long. Huh? Although she did not understand why he mentioned her hair, Yichen managed to divert Mosheng's attention. She asked anxiously, Is my hair very ugly? Yichen was about to smile. No. It was because she had a little bit more for him to love. He kissed her hair, attacking her already very weak confidence. Mosheng, it's truly very ugly.